Down in Las Vegas?
I can, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Then we're going to go ahead and get started. The recording is running, as I'm hearing, so we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Department of Agriculture, or the Nevada Board of Agriculture, excuse me, Thursday, February 14th, 2019, and we're starting off here at 1:02. So what we're going to do is start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Snyder, would you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll start out with roll call. We'll start with the board members. And since we started with you down at the end, Mr. Snyder?
Jim Snyder, Lyon County Row Crops.
Tim Duffrina, Humboldt County Livestock.
Heather Lockheed, Douglas County Pesticide.
Paul Anderson, Washoe County, I think that's where I'm from, representing petroleum.
West Bradley, Humboldt County Livestock. Charlie Free, Churchill County, representing crops.
Marlon Digby, Lincoln County, Federal Land.
Dave Coon, Clark County, Dairy Industry.
Woody Worthington, Douglas County, General Ag.
Okay, and then we'll jump down to Las Vegas.
Paul Null, representing
Can we set the pulse down with the sound? Okay, and
Pete Barris, Elko County, Nevada Wool Growers.
Thank you guys. Are there any guests in Las Vegas or Elko?
Patricia Hoppy, Deputy Administrator, Food Nutrition Division here in East Vegas.
Megan's here with me.
Okay. Megan Brown. Okay. All right, and then we'll start with department introductions here.
Jerry Conrad, Interim Director, Department of Agriculture. Rebecca Allard, Public Information Officer. Jenny Hudson, Agency Age of Services, HR for the Department of Agriculture.
Deborah Crowley, Fiscal Administrator for the Department of Agriculture.
Uma Anderson, Food and Nutrition Administrator for the Department of Agriculture.
Hayden Smikiewicz, Administrator for the Division of Consumer Equitability for the Department of Agriculture.
Doug Ferris, Department of Agriculture, Animal Industry Division Administrator.
Laura?
Alora Bartos, Executive Assistant.
And our tag.
Brandy Mooneyhan from the Attorney General's Office.
All right, thank you very much. I think we've pretty much covered everyone on the roll call. And we're going to go ahead and start out with public comment. Do we have anyone at any of the locations that would care to speak? Mr. Busselman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For your record, my name is Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. And I'd like to make these comments as kind of our overview of the process that you'll be going through today. Nevada Farm Bureau believes that the person selected as the director for the Nevada Department of Agriculture will play a very important role in establishing and maintaining an effective working relationship with Nevada agricultural stakeholders and other members of the public who depend on the Nevada Department of Agriculture. To meet this responsibility, we believe that the person selected needs to be able to demonstrate experience and skills of engagement, as well as a commitment to place on the emphasis of outreach to connect with agricultural representatives and others who have interactions and dealings with the department. Nevada Farm Bureau seeks to have an effective two-way communications and an effective working relationship with the director that the board selects. We hope to have the ability to call the director. Likewise, we look forward to being called to have discussions on important program and policy matters. Our past experience has been that the more advanced involvement we've been able to have, the more likely to find solutions or approaches to work on through concerns, including those dealing with regulations or fees. We consider it to be important that the person selected to this position be based in the Nevada Department of Agriculture's Sparks headquarters. Although we understand that in order to carry out their responsibility, they need to be able to, and willing and able to travel to other locations around the state to interact in the rural parts of the state. We appreciate the strong working partnerships that we've had with those who have served as a director for the Department of Agriculture in the past, and we look forward to building those same ties as we go forward. So good luck with your adventure, and we will go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trussell. Any other questions or, public comment? All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 3, approval of the minutes from the December 12th meeting. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to read those through already, and has anyone seen anything that needs to be corrected, any concerns with the minutes? By chance, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second it.
Okay. So motion was made by Mr. Worthington, seconded by Ms. Lackey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, thank you. Passes unanimously. Okay, so we're going to move on to number 4, board business. Discussion regarding the recruitment selection process to appoint a new director for the Department of Agriculture. First off, we'll kind of start through the process that we're going to be following today, just so everyone's clear on what we have going. So all of you should have a sheet of paper that has a list of questions that have been compiled that we're going to be asking of each of the applicants. And as you'll notice, one will have your name on it. At least one will have your name on it. And those are the questions that we're going to start out with. And then as time allows, when we finish up, it then will be more of like an open forum as far as the questions being asked by the board members. So if that's something that you don't feel was covered in these list of questions, or something that was on their resume or their application that you have questions about, we can dive into those in the second section here. But like I said, starting off, we're going to go off of these questions here. A couple things I want to make sure that we understand, that we need to ask the same questions of each candidate. We cannot ask one question of one and not the other. So we need to make sure we're consistent that way, okay? Let's see, what else? We can, during this time, as we're asking questions, we can ask a follow-up. So if their response elicits a question, we could go ahead and ask that at that time as well. What we're shooting for is that the process will hopefully we can finish with each one in 1 hour, but we'll have a little bit of flexibility if need be. Okay? Any questions so far?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Pete Parrish.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, Pete.
First, I want to apologize for not being there in person. I fully intended on being there, and I'm very sorry. We have had a rough couple of days. I have no vehicles even out to get out of town with. So we've had a lot of snow, and I apologize to the applicants. I fully feel that I should have been there in person, and I want to apologize to the applicants and the board and the staff for not being there today.
Well, Mr. Parrish, we appreciate you being part of this. We appreciate you showing up here. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything I missed as far as what you felt we should be covering in the interview process?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So, with that being said, I guess we could go ahead and, if you guys don't have any questions, we can move on to 4B, which is actually beginning the interview process of the first applicant, Dion Contine. Okay. And since some of these questions are rather lengthy, we're actually giving the applicant a list of the questions just like we have in front of us, so they can refer back to them. As you'll notice, some of them, maybe you can remember the first part, but not the fifth or sixth part of the question. And also, I want to say thank you while we're waiting here to Jerry and Laura and staff that has helped. This has been a lengthy process. We start back in May or something. So thank you very much for all the time and work that you guys have put into the process. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi.
So you actually have a list of questions that we're going to be starting out with. And so what we're going to do is just go through those, and we decided that since some of them are kind of a lengthy question, that we would help you guys out by letting you see and be able to refer back to them as we're going through this. So what we'll do is each of the board members will be introducing themselves and then asking the question. And once we go through these, if time allows, we'll go into more of like an open forum where the different board members can ask questions that are more specific to maybe their industry or things that they have particular concerns with.
Okay.
So actually, I'll go ahead and start this off with first off welcoming you and saying thank you very much for coming to meet with us and your interest in working as the director for the Board of Agriculture, or the Department of Agriculture. Sorry. So first off, just please tell us a little about yourself and why you want to work for the Nevada Department of Agriculture.
Okay, so my name is Dion Contine, and I'll kind of start at the beginning. I'm a native Nevadan. I was born and raised in Las Vegas. I graduated from Rancho High School. I'm very close to the Anderson Dairy there. I left Las Vegas. I went and spent some time in California, 14 years. Worked for 10 years as a secretary before I went to college. Had the opportunity to go back to Nevada, to come back to Nevada in 2000 for a job, and I've been back in my home state ever since. I moved to Northern Nevada after I graduated from law school, and at the same time had a child. I didn't want him to be raised in Las Vegas, and I wanted to still be part of the state. So I took the opportunity to work at the AG's office here. I started off, I represented the state health plan and was able to take a case to the Nevada Supreme Court within the first 6 months of being at the AG's office. It was important to the agency and to the state as it had to do with retirees and joining the plan. And so then went on to represent the Nevada Department of Taxation. In 2012, I was asked by the director at the time to come over as a deputy in the agency. I was promoted to the director in 2014, and from that time until last year at around the same time when I left, I basically implemented programs. In the 2015 session, the legislature enacted the commerce tax, which then was implemented by the Department of Taxation. And when the first tax return was due, a month later, the people of Nevada voted to legalize adult use marijuana, with the responsibility of implementing that program, the regulations, and the taxation of that into the Department of Taxation. I left that job really just to run for the Nevada legislature, which I was not successful at. But I think that's a good segue into why ag, and I'll get there, trust me, is because, I'm always, I'm trying to push myself. I'm always trying to try something new. I'm always trying to learn or develop a skill set That's why I left being a practicing lawyer and went to the agency, because I thought with the legal knowledge and then that hands-on, personal experience with the agency, that would develop that skill set for me. And so I think agriculture has many different and important, vital and important roles in our state, and it would give me an opportunity to study and become an expert and develop a new policy area, as well as I think I also like to add value to the process as well. And so I think the experience and the skills and the leadership and the important work that I've done on a statewide level could serve the agency as well. So it's kind of that learning something new versus feeling like I want to add value.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and turn to the second question. Vice Chair Dr. Spratling.
Would you explain to us how you view the Department of Agriculture and its function? What does it do? What do you expect to deal with when you're here?
So I think there's some broad categories, and these were the things that I thought were vital and important to this to our state and what the department does. And so basically protecting our food, working with industry to protect our food, to protect what we drink, to make sure our fuels are good, and having that type of a public safety role and public health role, but also while working with industry, knowing that they have to operate. I think the providing the nutrition and making sure that our students have the food that they need day in and day out, and during the school day is an important role that this agency plays. I think working alongside of the public and state and federal and local partners in conservation, land use, or land management type issues through, I know the governor did this, I think it's referred to as the SET, where there's work with the wildlife and conservation, and then the federal partners as well. Those were three of the top. That's kind of the broad categories that I see as being important to the state.
Thank you. Ms. Lackey?
Yes. Can you please describe for us your experience in some of the Department of Agriculture's areas of focus, such as farming, pest control, nursery stock, ranching, grazing, petroleum, dairying, child or adult food nutrition programs, and food manufacturing? Long-winded question.
You wondered why we gave it to you in writing, huh?
So, I mean, I guess this is where I'm going to be probably not as strong as maybe another candidate who you're considering today. I don't have a background in agriculture. I have a background in appreciating agriculture as, the ability for us to sustain ourselves either through food or in our drinks and our clothes and our in all the ways that agriculture touches us in what we, you're usually using something that's either grown or made. So, but I guess where I would say that I would make up for that would be in my proven track record of adapting to new challenges, being successful at pretty much everything that I've committed myself to, from taking that first case to the Nevada Supreme Court as a baby lawyer after being at the agency for 6 months, to standing up a tax program that I'd never done that before. I never worked in an agency before I went there. Before I went to department, I never had implemented a tax program. And I think that ability, my understanding of the state system, my ability to get important work done, to build consensus around sometimes controversial or issues that people don't, there's going to be differing opinions and differing sides to it. I mean, the legislature enacted a tax. on business, and not every business was really excited about that. So it was my job to implement that program and do the regulatory process and kind of make everybody happy to the degree that they can be. And I think, you know, figuring that out, figuring how to implement that, figuring how to, you know, to build those consensus very quickly as well, because both with the Commerce Tax Program and the Adult Use Program, it was a very quick implementation. And so being able to understand the policy area, understand what needs to be done, and implement that. So I don't see any reason why I would not be an expert in all of the areas that this agency manages, you know, within the very, very near term.
Mr. Frey?
Oh, welcome. My name is Charlie Frey,
Hi.
and I'm more or less the guy that kind of checks for the accounting matters. And Deborah Crowley, of course, is a fiscal administrator here. And I guess my question is, describe your experience and how you develop and evaluate the accounting system and are able to keep the budget in line with what has been proposed.
So, you know, I guess for good or bad, you know, there's very stringent processes, state processes. So basically following those. And also I was the leader of an agency that collected and distributed $6 billion a year in state and local government revenue. So being able to monitor that process was something that I had to do as the director of the agency. And if the money didn't get from point A to point B timely and correctly, then it would come back to me. Obviously, I've been involved in 3 legislative sessions where I presented my own agency budget. I defended that budget, and the budget was successfully implemented, and then over the course of the biennium, then managed that budget. Only a few times have I ever had to go to the Interim Finance Committee, which is the committee where we have to go if we aren't spending money in the right way, or one time, and that was because of essentially because of the legalization of marijuana and just all the unknowns that was around that, and figuring out how to get the money that we needed to get to implement the program timely.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move down to Las Vegas. Mr. No?
Yes. Hi, John. This is Paul No.
Hi.
You pretty much covered my question a little bit in your last answer, but just if you could tell us about your experience, if you could elaborate on formulating and preparing complex budgets and how you manage a budget planning and preparation process.
So again, you know, the budget planning process for the state obviously starts almost a year before session starts. The initial planning, getting with staff, having internal meetings, figuring out where we are at that particular time, figuring out what the needs are for the agency, developing then our own internal plan, and defending that internally so that we're strong to defend that as we leave the agency, then defending that to the governor's finance office, and then defending it to the legislature. So just being strong, knowing what we want to do, working internally, making sure that we ask the questions, I think, that other people are going to ask so that we can answer them before they're asked of us, which is sometimes you think you've asked every question that you can, and then you still have 19 questions from legislative staff, but that's part of the process. And so just being, you know, knowing that that's part of the process and dealing with that and being timely and being thoughtful when you respond.
Thank you. Mr. Worthington.
Yes, Woody Worthington for the record. Dion, welcome.
Thank you.
Describe a time when you had several directions you could choose to solve a problem. Walk us through that process you followed to make a decision that had the best chance of a positive outcome.
So I guess maybe I'll talk a little bit about the implementation of marijuana, because that was kind of the most time sensitive and just public. I remember one time I had, this was before just in medical, that there was just a regulation that said, like, you have to file a tax return and you have to file it on this day. And I mean, media came to the reg hearing, so it's like it's kind of a crazy environment. But what I'm going to talk about is more in the implementation of the initiative from 2016. And this is one area where I had to make a quick decision about how to move forward, and I made the decision based on all the information that I had available to me, and I moved forward, and then some people didn't like it, and I ended up getting sued. But what really went into that, so basically it was the decision that had to do with the distribution of marijuana. In marijuana, in the initiative legalization, there's a distribution license. In medical, there was not that distribution license. So that was one area that we had to figure out what we were going to do as we transitioned from the medical marijuana to the adult marijuana. And the initiative language is very vague. By all accounts, it was meant, the language was meant to open. So basically, the language was limited to only licensees that had a Chapter 369 license, which was a liquor license, a liquor wholesale license. Unless the department determined that there wasn't a sufficient number of those licensees to serve the market. The way I interpreted that was that there would be a robust wholesale marijuana distribution from the 369 license holders, and there was not a robust. There were a few licensees. I think there's about 155, or there was at that time 155 licensed liquor wholesalers, and there were maybe like 3 or 4 that really small businesses that had shown an interest. So basically, based on the fact that the initiative was going to come into effect on July 1st, and based on the fact that that this is a market that needed a robust distribution, I made the decision that to open that up to other entities to obtain licenses to distribute. I could have taken a more, I could have just said, we're not going to go until we have a robust number of licensees to serve the market, but I didn't choose to go that way.
Next question, Mr. Kuhn.
Dave Kuhn, welcome neighbor. Rancho High School is right down the street from us. Good to meet with you here.
Thank you.
My question is, describe your communication style and what you think is the best process for providing information within a department that has multiple locations. And this is me just kind of ad-libbing and adding a little bit with all these good people that are very competent and capable.
So I kind of, I have I like to have a lot of input, and you can kind of tell I'm a little chatty. I like to have good communication, good discussion. I like a lot of input. I like ideas. I like to talk things to death in some ways. I'm a big picture person, but I also really do care about the details, so I kind of want to dig into things. In terms of my staff, I guess I would say, I want everybody to feel like they can come to me, that they can talk to me, that they can tell me their ideas, and I'm going to take a lot of that in, and I'm going to act on that. And sometimes, though, I'm not going to be able to, because I have bosses too. And so just making sure that they understand that in our communication, if I don't do something that they want to do, I want them to understand why I'm not doing it. And so, but I want them to feel free to come to me. I want that open communication. I couldn't be in the position that I'm in today. I couldn't have implemented programs. I couldn't have implemented the programs I implemented without really strong partners, and that's my staff, community members, industry people. So I like that really broad consensus, or not consensus, but that broad discussion, and I like consensus too. But ultimately, I'm going to take all that information, and I still feel like it's my responsibility to make a decision. So I like to have a lot of discussion that informs my decision, but I will make a decision. That's kind of how I operate.
All right, thank you. Mr. Higby.
Yes, Marlon Digby. If we were to interview the people who have reported to you in the past, how would they describe your management style, strengths, and weaknesses?
Oh, everybody would love me. No, I mean, I do have a pretty good, I have people, I mean, I still talk to the people at the Department of Taxation all the time. They call me and seek my advice on, issues that they're having, or just to, bounce things around or whatever. I did, I had a lot of really strong, talented people when I went to the agency, and I tried to really identify and promote those people that had kind of been overlooked before. So I was able to build a pretty strong team. I think, not everybody's going to love me. That's not realistic. So I would say a very large portion of my direct reports, pretty much almost every one of them, would say that I was a good manager, that I listened to people, that I took their opinions, that I gave them the opportunity to grow in their positions as well, that I supported them in what and that was important to me too, like understanding what are your barriers to accomplishing the job that we have given to you, and then how do we overcome them, so working with them on that. I think, I don't know, we all see ourselves a little bit differently than most everybody sees us, but I think I still have strong personal relationships with many of the people that reported to me or worked with me at the department. So, and I think that across the board from where I've worked and the leadership roles that I have, and that's important to me.
Actually, if I could ask, so if you could touch on the last word about weaknesses.
I guess, I would say I'm intense, so maybe I would make somebody feel like, some people that were more sensitive or that maybe they didn't have a say. Because, we're dealing constantly with a lot of things that we have to deal with, and so, but I feel like I recognize that about myself, and I think it is, I don't even know if it's a weakness. I always say I'm a type A- personality, so I'm not quite like a type A, but I'm really close to that. So, but I don't know if intensity is necessarily a weakness, but, sometimes maybe people would feel like I was short and I didn't listen as much as I could, but I recognize that in myself, so I try to deal with that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Go out to Elko. Mr. Paris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pete Paris for the record. Welcome to your application to the Board of Ag. In a new work environment as a manager, how have you gone about meeting and developing relationships with your new co-workers, supervisors, and reporting staff? Please describe how you have built a successful working environment.
When I worked at the Department of Taxation, I came as a deputy, so that was like about 150 people that were in the section that I represented, which is kind of about the size of this agency. Just building like a really strong relationship with my direct report, and, you know, having that back and forth communication, doing, you know, again, to go to the question earlier about different areas of the state, in that regard, that many of the people who reported up to me were based in Las Vegas. So, you know, really going and spending a little bit of that time and getting to know the people and working with them. Again, that I mentioned earlier, I communicate, I feel like I communicate a lot with people, and also that I care about what challenges they face. So if there's something I can do if there's something that I can do about their condition and their working environment, I will try very hard to do it. And if there's nothing I can do about it, either because we don't have the resources or I have to deal with something else before I can deal with that, I mean, then I will say that. And so I think that's how I've been able to build relationships with, you know, an agency this size. I think it would be very easy, obviously, to know pretty much everybody personally. You know, the Department of Taxation grew from the time I was there. When I left, it was about 400 people, and that's when it became a little bit harder to kind of get to know everybody in the entire agency, because if they're a tax examiner in the Las Vegas office, I'm not going to have the opportunity to see them as much as I would internally.
All right, thank you. Mr. Duffrina?
Hi, I'm Tim Duffrina, and I guess my question would be is, how have you resolved conflict when dealing with a negative or difficult employee?
Well, obviously, you know, we have the steps that we have to go through with classified employees in the state of Nevada. I was always kind of the final, you know, mediator or arbitrator within our agency to try to resolve any types of issues. You know, obviously, again, I do try to listen. I do try to work with people who are struggling or having trouble meeting the expectations of the position. I try to be clear about what those expectations are. But having said that, I mean, I do have implemented progressive discipline and terminated people as well. But just going through that process, making sure you're in line, using your HR resources, either within the agency or at HR services, you know, trying, you know, one thing is, when I first went to the department, and I think for me, this is the thing that really, that I deal with the most, or that I try to deal with the most haste, if I could, was an employee that just doesn't kind of live up to your expectations. There's a lot of working that you can do with that person, a lot of guiding and making expectations clear. But then, you know, when there are employees that then affect a broad category of people who work for them and become kind of toxic to the environment, those are the ones that I try to deal with a little bit more. You know, not forceful, but just like, you know, if you're in a position to cause a lot of havoc in a section, that's something that needs to be dealt with in some way or another. And I would not let those go. I would try very hard to resolve those disputes, even if they were, you know, a few chains below my level.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snyder?
Hi, I'm Jim Snyder. Thank you for applying for a position.
Thank you for having me.
Have you ever been responsible for developing a strategic plan for an organization, and what was your approach?
I haven't been responsible for it, but I've been involved in strategic planning process. When I lived in Carson City, the Carson City School District was going through a 5-year strategic plan. So that was a lot of, in that case, it was a facilitator that facilitated discussion among various stakeholders and how getting input from community, parents, teachers, administrators in that process. So I would say using that same type of process. I think it's probably, I'd want somebody that either has some training or some expertise in facilitating that process, but I think having a broad process. I mean, I guess the closest thing I would say that was kind of like that was the governor had a task force last year, or a couple years ago now, on the implementation of the marijuana program. There were about 20 people on there, and it resulted in a report that went to the governor and then was the basis for kind of the regulatory structure. So it was kind of that strategic plan for implementation. And that would be the closest. So just, we had, I don't know, like 100 meetings, various meetings, and different interest groups and people getting together. So I think that would, that's the closest like I've ever been in a strategic planning process.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Spratt.
Would you describe your experience working with local, state, and federal government agencies and community organizations?
So, you know, as the leader of a state agency, you're constantly working with other agencies. The Department of Taxation regularly works with economic development, Division of Insurance in administering the insurance premium tax, DMV in some ways, because there's some crossover and some confusion sometimes with taxpayers on who administers what tax, and so it's fairly broad. With respect to federal issues, one issue that was very significant that actually led to a Supreme Court case that came out last year has to do with the taxation of online retail, and so that was there was always these proposals in Congress to deal with that. That never went anywhere. So just basically working a lot with the governor's office in D.C. on those types of issues and other issues. In our state is a member of the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement, so that's broadly working with a lot of other states on sales and use tax issues. The Department of Taxation has a local government services department. It oversees property tax issues, appraisal, in net proceeds of minerals tax, so always working, and we also distribute a ton, the department distributed a ton of money to local governments, so, you know, working with local governments a lot, working with local governments, and other state agencies. I've been here on meetings that had to do with marijuana, either lab issues or just, I think there was a conference here a few years ago after several states legalized. So I have broad experience in, and then, you know, working with industry groups like the Nevada Taxpayers Association and other businesses and lobbyists and all that were interested in, you know, what was going on. Taxpayers themselves, that there's 155,000 sales and use tax, or about that, sales and use tax accounts in the state of Nevada. So you have a lot of those small business taxpayers that are part of that as well. So spent a lot of time, you know, as I've mentioned before, building consensus and trying to get people on board with kind of what was happening. So.
All right, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and finish up the formal interview portion here. Oh, excuse me. Fine. Actually, I'll go back to Mr. Frey and ask him. On your question, did you believe that it was completely asked by you, or did you want anything else on it as far as the applying public and fiscal policy?
Well, I think she pretty much covered it.
Okay. Then we'll end it with this section with me just asking you, do you have any questions for us on the board?
Well, I won't ask you all individual questions, since there's a lot of you, and that, you know, could generally take it. I had a nice chat with Jerry a couple days ago where I asked a few questions that I wanted to ask, so I think I'm good in terms of my questions.
Okay. So what we'll do now is go ahead and open up to the board to ask questions that that haven't been addressed already, ones that may be pertinent to your industry or specific questions that you may have. But once again, I just want to remind you, I'll take note here, and Laura and Jerry, I'm sure, will assist me. But we just want to make sure that you ask the same question of both applicants, okay? So with that being said, I'll go ahead and open up. Do we have anyone with some questions?
I have one.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. No.
Dion, have you very much experience in your fiscal budgeting to interact directly with the legislature?
Oh, yes. I regularly would appear before the legislature on the budget, on money issues, on policy issues, both informally and formally, so at the speaker's table, and then also whenever they had questions individually. I gave lots of presentations and spoke about what the department did and the various revenue sources and where the money came from and where it went and those types of things. So.
All right, thank you.
All right, Dr. Spratling.
I'm going to ask and move towards where you admittedly said that you have weaknesses in understanding the nuances of each of our industries, whether it be petroleum, livestock, plant industry, whatever. But with that lack, and knowing that here we are in a legislative session, it has started, we're already rolling, there's kind of two-pronged responsibility from this, or multi-pronged, but two of them are that this department regulates industries, and hopefully those are fair regulations that are put in place, and hopefully this board would help with that process. But also before the legislature is becoming more and more urban, the members of that legislature are becoming more and more urban and have very little background into agriculture or any of the other things that this department deals with. So it's going to, along with defending your budgets, you may have to be somewhat of an advocate, at least, defend different parts and nuances of an industry. Because some very small things can make a major, done in the legislature, just wording of this or that could make a tremendous difference in the viability of one of these industries. How would you deal with that?
So, I mean, and I don't know if it makes you feel better to know this, but that's statewide, that's agency-wide, those same issues, because, it's a citizen legislature, and that nobody's going to be nobody's going to be more knowledgeable about your issues or what you're doing than you are, right? So, from my perspective, again, I mean, I learn very quickly. I ask a ton of questions. You have seemingly a very professional and competent staff here. You use those people, you get the information you need. I would use the relationships that I've built over the last 5 years with legislators or legislative staff to make sure that the issues were considered, make sure that that the concerns of the agency were put forth either on the record or not on the record, or however best that the interest of the state, the board, the agency. I would work, and I have done that in the capacity that I served before. So that is a very because you're the one that knows, or I mean, again, when you're the director, you're not there in a vacuum. You have your staff, and you use those people, and you go to people that have certain levels of expertise, and you get the information from them. And then hopefully what I feel like I could add is that translating into why that's important and using the relationships and I'm a known quantity, I guess, to people. in some regards, because I have worked with them. They trust me. I'm always honest with them. I have a good working relationship. I also was the caucus endorsed candidate for my race, so I was able to work in a campaign capacity with many people that are serving in the legislature now. So I think there's that trust relationship that I have with them.
Any other questions from the board? So I'm actually going to ask one. So especially since you're here local, one of the issues that we as a board and the department have been facing for quite some time, in fact, longer than I've been on the board, is the Virginia Range feral or stray horses. Obviously, you've thought through being interested in a director, and so we just would like to hear your thoughts on what as a director, how would you address that situation?
Well, I think, obviously, I don't know everything that everybody's done up until now to address the situation, but I think, again, trying to build that consensus, reaching out to any partners, whether it be, there's people on both sides and all sides, or maybe there's more than one side, figuring out, using some resources like our local partners or federal partners, or however you can getting everybody in the room, and maybe this has already been done, but, dealing with that, dealing with the different personalities, the different perspectives, the different sides, and asking people that have strong opinions one way or the other, within the constraints that we have, whether it be money or time or people, those important resources, how would you manage this issue? And kind of getting, delving into that and kind of getting different groups of people to give some insight into how they might solve the problem, given the constraints that surround the problem. But I think and I don't know how much work has gone into all of that, and so I don't want to second guess everything. I'd probably ask about 100 questions first, and then I'd start strategizing, how can we solve this problem? I mean, I'm a problem solver by nature. That's what I like to do. It goes with the implementation of programs and things like that. It's just kind of how I'm wired. So I would like to deal with it. I would be excited. I mean, maybe I should. I would be excited to tackle the problem.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions from any of the board members? Mr. Paris, you okay out there?
Mr. Chairman, Pete Paris for the record. I do have one question. Sorry to put you on the spot again on a hot topic like the wild horses, but my constituents have put me in this position. Some of our biggest problems are not problems, but I'm here to address animal health and predator control. And I was just wondering how you feel that predator control should be handled, and if you can work with Wildlife Services, that I think is in the room with you, to help the best results for the state of Nevada for all livestock producers. The sheep industry is not the only one that uses Wildlife Services. And I just would like to know how you feel about that area. Thanks.
Predator control.
Yeah.
So I think.
Could you? Thank you.
Let me just say how I understand it, and then maybe if there's some clarification. So basically, it's balancing the predators, basically industry or the sheep herders or the other cattle owners or industry obviously want to keep their products and their cattle and their sheep safe, and so it's basically balancing that with and so controlling the predators that may prey on those animals as they're out on the range, and so basically how does wildlife and conservation and the industry essentially all work together to get their desired outcome? Is that the question?
That pretty well sums it up.
So, I mean, I guess, again, you know, building consensus, taking the concerns of the industry into consideration, also taking the concerns of conservation, wildlife, public health and safety, and kind of combining all of those and finding that balanced approach. You know, I've always, you know, I've worked with taxation, I've worked with businesses. And so my philosophy and my approach to dealing with that is how can we best protect and make and allow and support businesses in being compliant with whatever rules or regulations that they have, while protecting either the revenue or the public health or the public safety of the state. So kind of working really hard at blending those and taking, you know, all of the concerns and working with the various partners to get to a result that, you know, I think in my letter I talked about the commerce tax where, you know, there's oftentimes in what we do in public policy is that nobody is like super happy with the result, and it's just like in legislation, but everybody has been part of the process and they valued that process, and it leads to an outcome that allows people to at least be able to stomach the result, you know. So that's kind of where what you facilitating that and getting to that is kind of important.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Paris, were you able to hear that okay?
Yes, I heard her well. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. One more time, board members, any questions? All right, well, with that, thank you very much for being here with us, and I believe you understand the process now, that we'll be bringing in another candidate,
right,
going through the same questions with them, and then we'll deliberate after that.
Okay.
All right, so thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, take a few minutes, why don't we, what do you think, maybe take a 10-minute break? Give everyone 10 minutes, and we'll be back with the next applicant. Action. Go ahead and have everyone take a seat. We're going to go ahead and get started.
Because they're like, rainy weather,
Yeah.
you know,
Can I go?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order here with our second applicant, Jennifer Oxley. So to explain, you do have a piece of paper that's flipped upside down next to you there. What we're going to do is go through these prepared questions, and each one of the board members will ask at least one question of you. And then once we're done with that, if time allows, we will then go into an open forum. Actually, one way or another, we're going to go into an open forum because that took place with our last applicant as well. So we'll be asking the same questions, but some of the questions are pretty lengthy and deep. And so we wanted to make sure that you've got a written version of it so you can refer back to it as you're answering that for us.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and start off and just say, first off, thank you very much for applying for the director's position. And with that being said, just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in being the director for the Nevada Board of Department of Agriculture. Sorry.
No, I get to fumble. Well, first of all, Jennifer Ott, for the record, I wanted to say thank you all for allowing me to participate in this process and to be considered for this position. I really appreciate it. A little bit about myself. I graduated with a degree in chemistry from the University of Texas at Austin. I worked during my undergraduate a little bit in the petrochemical industry through there and a little bit after college. And I will fully admit it, I was not exactly enthralled with the industry, so I it was a lot of shift work. It was difficult. So I moved to California, where I got a job in the wine industry, and I was there for 10 years in the wine industry, and that was really my first professional experience in agriculture. I worked for a company that performed laboratory testing for grapes coming in from the field, but also all the way through to the finished product of exporting wine outside to the United States. And so I worked in a little bit of, in my capacity of 10 years, I worked in all areas, the laboratory. I did a lot of consulting with grape growers and winemakers. I did a lot of sales work with some of our products. We sold biological products there. And so after 10 years, our company got bought out, and I felt it was time for me to move on. I went to University of Nevada, Reno, and received my MBA degree from UNR. And I missed working in agriculture, and my thesis project for the MBA program was to create the Desert Farming Initiative at the university. And so I was able to work through the College of Business creating the Desert Farming Initiative. We started with a dirt parking lot at the Valley Road Experiment Station, and grew a program from there, then moved over to the College of Agriculture, where I was lucky enough to work for a few years, and then moved on to here, the plant industry at NDA. And as to why, thank you, as to why I wanted to work at the, or why I want to work, I work here, why I want to be director. Can I answer that question?
Please.
Okay. So, I feel that the director for this agency needs to have an understanding of 3 different areas. One, needs to have a understanding of the industry in the state and a relationship with the producers in the state. I feel that's really important. 2, I feel like a director really needs to understand resource management. And by resource management, I mean not only financial management, but human capital as well, as working with teams, directing with teams, setting goals, all of those that come with working within an organization. And the 3rd is that I feel the director needs to be able to develop relationships and work alongside other agencies, whether it's other state agencies, community groups, nonprofits, federal agencies, really being able to represent the department well and to develop relationships in order to move what we feel is important for the industry forward. And so I want to be director because I feel like I have all of those 3 areas of experience and qualifications.
All right, thank you. Dr. Spratling.
Would you please explain your understanding of the Nevada Department of Agriculture and its function?
Sure. So, multiple functions. Well, okay, so the Department of Ag has 5 divisions: plant industry, animal, food, nutrition, administration, and consumer equitability. The understanding of our role is we're both an education organization, a support organization to represent the industry throughout not only Western region, but the United States, and also a regulatory agency as well to protect Nevada agriculture and protect the public, but also to help industries that fall under our purview to succeed. So really supporting those industries and working with the industries, but also walking that fine line of making sure that we're following regulations and statutes and keeping everybody safe as well. Do you want me to go into divisions, or are we good?
No, I think that's the overall.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Ms. Blackley?
Jennifer, can you please describe your experience in some of Nevada Department of Agriculture's areas of focus, such as farming, pest control, nursery stock, ranching or grazing, petroleum, dairying, child or adult food nutrition programs, or food manufacturing?
Sure. So, as I explained a little bit into my introduction, I worked in the wine industry for 10 years, working both on the grape growing side and the winemaking side. so had some experience there. It was really interesting experience and entry into agriculture just because of how specific it is and how really dialed down it is as far as crop growing. So that was really interesting for me. Taking a step back, I did work for Bayer Corporation as a petrochemical chemist, so I had a little bit of experience there, not a ton. But I do have, because of my chemistry background, I do have a lot of experience in sort of the scientific side of that. Moving into Nevada, when I worked for the Desert Farming Initiative at UNR, that was a farming operation. We grew crops, not only row crops, but in hoop houses and greenhouses as well. So that touches on a little bit of the nursery stock, understanding both indoor agriculture and row cropping agriculture as well. And then as far as food nutrition programs, as part of my role at the Desert Farming Initiative, we grew vegetables for the Washoe County School District fruit and vegetable program. So we worked with Washoe County and partnered with them to provide them with fresh fruits and vegetables for their summer lunch and early school year lunch programs there. So we were able to, I made a lot of contacts within the school district and sort of worked through that system. So I had a little bit of understanding about how the school districts work and that kind of thing. So that about hits it. Food manufacturing is difficult. We have, at least on the fruit and vegetable side, very few options for processing and food manufacturing in the state of Nevada. It's mostly commercial kitchens or privately held entities that aren't open to other farmers, so there's not a lot of experience there. So.
Mr. Frey.
Jennifer, could you describe your experience in developing, evaluating, and applying your knowledge to fiscal policies and accounting systems like Deborah has to do to keep a track of everything, and how you go ahead and monitor that?
Sure. So in specific to fiscal policy, anytime I think that you're in management, you're in charge of budgeting, right? So very early on in my career, when I started to supervise programs or departments, budgeting is always that process, whether it's, on the private side or on the public side. So I have quite a bit of experience with budgeting and fiscal work. On the public side, when I worked at UNR, that was my first foray into the public side, and it was like jumping into the deep water of the pool, not knowing how to swim. It's a completely different beast, to be honest with you. And so it was a huge learning curve for me to learn that public side of it, not only the boundaries that come from working with public money, but having state money versus federal money versus a nonprofit donation type funds and that kind of thing. And so so the experience of it. And so I had quite a bit of experience coming from the UNR side and public monies, and then when I began here at the Department of Agriculture, I feel like it was another jump into the deep end, and the rules that are surrounding that. And so one of the first things that I did when I started working here was immediately started looking at the budgets. Really that guides a lot of what you can do. You evaluate programs, you meet staff, and you find the gaps in what is happening and what needs to be addressed, but you can't address some of that without the financial backing. If we are low on staff, but we have no money to hire anybody, or that money is allocated, I don't want to say incorrectly, but allocated in places that maybe it might not be as beneficial to the department, then those are the things that you have to fix. And so finding where your revenues are coming from, whether it's appropriations or fees or federal funds, and then, you know, allocating them wisely, finding your efficiencies, really going through that whole process. So, pretty good experience.
All right. Go down to Las Vegas, Mr. No.
Yes, hi Jennifer.
Hello, Bob.
In answering your last question, could you elaborate a little bit more about how you manage a budget planning and preparation process?
Sure. So I might have overlapped a little bit about that, so I apologize. So I'll just speak to my experience in the last year for the state budget planning process. Like I said, can you hear me okay? Well,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, you know, when I arrived, you know, I did I don't want to say an audit because that has a certain connotation, but a review of the financial portions of the plant industry budget. And, you know, I wasn't here but 2 months before we really had to turn in our ideas for this next biennium budget. And so we had to turn that around really quickly, and so prepare that. And so, again, like I said, you know, looking at what the program needed, where we thought we needed to be over the next 2 years, where our gaps were, what we thought wasn't being addressed programmatically, what was being addressed, is the funding appropriate for those gaps that we needed, and to sort of forecast what the next couple of years would look like so that we could start making those decisions. And so I think it's, you know, it's not something that, you know, I do on my own. We certainly, you know, include the program managers and the program staff in that, because they're the subject matter experts and really know what's going on in the field and have an idea of where the industry is growing. And so, yeah, I'm not sure what else to add to that other than, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Worthington.
Woody Worthington for the record. Oh, wait. Describe a time when you have had several directions you could choose to solve a problem. Walk us through the process you followed to make a decision that had the best chance of a positive outcome.
So, a problem where we had several directions to take and what the process was to figure out. Okay. So, I hate being generic, but I think, okay. So, at the university, within the Desert Farming Initiative, funding was always an issue. Funding was always an issue, and that was one of the things that we were constantly addressing. And so, you know, one of the ways that we could work through that problem is, okay, so we can write more grants. That's, you know, not always a sure thing. You know, state monies are hard to come by. I think we all know that. And the other, you know, problem would be, or the other solution would be to partnerships with other groups. And so to really go through and look at the feasibility of how to receive that additional funding is, you know, maybe I'm not saying this the right way, but is to sort of make an assessment on your low-hanging fruit, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and to look at where you can, for instance, for the private fundings, you know, to look at developing relationships, to develop symbiotic relationships, and to go through that problem-solving process of, you know, these are the folks I need to talk to, here's how I need to reach out to them. Where do each of us need each other so that we can have that symbiotic relationship? I'm always constantly looking at, okay, you know, here's who we can work with, here's what should happen, but is it feasible? And so to sort of go through that problem-solving process that way.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kuhn?
Ms. Ott, would you share with us your communication style and what you think is the best process for providing information with a department that has multiple locations throughout the state?
So,
these good people.
So I've had not only experience with multiple locations here, but also in previous companies I worked for before as well. There's always issues with communication, and especially with some of the smaller offices not feeling like they're getting the communication that they need to do their job. And I think that really transparency is the best way to go forward regarding that. You know, it sounds sort of cliche, but it's communication. You have to, you know, spend the time to check in with, you know, the people that you're working with to make sure, do you have any issues? Are there any problems? You have to be able to bring those to me, or I can't help you. And so, and being very transparent in the process of, you know, we understand, for instance, that you're having IT issues, but it's not just you, it's us too. And explaining to them too, we have these problems up here, and sharing some of the hurts and as well as the successes. And I really think, yeah, it comes down to communication and transparency, and really letting folks know that they're not alone, and, you know, we're dealing with the same things. So.
All right, Mr. Higbee.
Yes. If we were to interview the people who have reported to you in the past, how would they describe your management style, strengths, and weaknesses?
You know, what's interesting, so we all have our own style of the way that we like to be managed, right? So one of the things that I learned early on, you know, I'm the type of person that, you know, tell me what you want me to do, give me the goal, give me the timeline, and then I'm done, you know, and I'll do what I need to do to get the job done. And I learned pretty early on that not everybody works that way. And so that's the way, when I was managing people at first, that I would manage. And then I received feedback that that wasn't working for everybody. And so I really try hard now to spend the time with staff to find out, you know, what they need to be able to do their job. Sometimes it's just a check-in, hey, I'm listening, I'm here, let's talk about issues. Sometimes it's a little bit more support. Let's talk about your budget. Let's talk about what's going on this week. And so I would hope that staff would say that I have a good communication style, and I try really hard to work with folks and make sure everybody's involved. I think probably my weakness would be that I'm not always probably clear on deadlines. That is one of the things that I've had feedback on, is that if I've asked somebody to do something, it's not always clear that I don't need that right away, that sometimes it's okay if it's, you know, the last thing on your list of things to do. So I could probably improve on that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Paris.
Pete Paris, for the record. I want to welcome you to the interview process. In your new work environment as a manager, how have you gone about meeting and developing relationships with your new co-workers, supervisors, and reporting staff? Please describe how you have built a successful working environment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Did you hear this? Thank you.
Pardon?
Thank you.
Just mute your thing.
Yeah.
So I think I've said before that relationships and working with folks and meeting with people is really important. And that's the way I operate internally as well as externally. So building a successful work environment, I think, really means getting out and talking to people, and not only to, to the folks that report to you within the division, but also to other divisions, and understanding, where their struggles are, where their successes are, and how we can work together, because we do have a lot of overlap, well, not a lot, but some overlap depending on the division. And so, building the successful work environment, I can tell you that when I first started working here, one of the first things I did was scheduled meetings with every program, and, what are you doing? What is your day-to-day work look like? What do you need to do your job better? What are the problems that you're finding in the industry? And really talking to folks. And to me, that's incredibly important. And it works with producers externally as well, as, what's going on in the industry, and why are the problems there that exist? Is it something that NDA can address, or is it something that needs to be addressed through another agency, or maybe, an industry group? And so I really value that. I think it's really important to build those relationships and have those conversations.
Thank you. Mr. DeFrina.
Thank you for your application. How have you resolved conflicts when dealing with negative or difficult?
I call HR.
Call HR.
I'm not kidding. After I call HR.
That's that buck.
So yeah. I sort of feel like a little bit of a broken record, but I think it depends on the conflict, right? So if it's something where there's a process in place, especially in the state system, right? I mean, it's different other places, but especially in the state system, if there's a process in place, then we're required to follow that process, and we need to do our due diligence in that way. If there's not, you have to talk to them and say, hey, this is a problem. This is what's been reported to me. What happened? How did it get to this? And, sort of, have that conversation and figure out why we got there, and then make them aware that, that HR is involved, and, that, what the process would likely be after that. And so it's really, informing them that, whether it was a behavioral situation or a policy situation, and making them understand that, that wasn't acceptable, or trying to get their side of the story and go from there. So I think it's specific to the situation. But
thank you. Mr. Snyder.
Yes, thank you for applying for the position. Jennifer, have you ever been responsible for developing a strategic plan for an organization, and what was your approach?
Yes, in a small way. So like I said, in my previous position at the university, the DFI was my program. It was like I said, it was my master's thesis. So I developed a business plan for it, and procured the original funding for that program, and the entire program was really, can I say that I had, a map on the wall that had strategic plan and it had it completely laid out? No. But, we had a business plan, and just like any other business plan, it changes over the years. If it's a good business plan, then you change and update it, and we did that. And really looking at understanding your strengths and your weaknesses, and where there's opportunities to fill in gaps with a program, and taking that overall view, and taking into account the industry that you're working with, and where the potential for that industry is to grow, and to meet those needs with your ideas. And so setting goals, setting a timeline. Timelines are incredibly important because I think if you have a strategic plan, it can just sit out there forever if we don't have timelines. And then move forward that way.
Thank you.
Okay, come back to you, Dr. Sretling.
Describe your experience working with local, state, and federal government agencies and community organizations.
So, since the beginning of my professional career, I've been working with all of the above. In the wine industry company, we were regulated by TTB, Tobacco Tax Trade Bureau. I probably don't have that right anymore, but we are also regulated by FDA. And we also were ISO accredited as well. And so we had pretty significant federal oversight when it comes to working with that industry. So we had a lot of experience in that. We also, as part of that, were, so part of the products that we sold as part of that company were yeast, bacteria, and other products that you use to make wine for the fermentation process. And so I was working at that company during 9/11, and you can imagine after 9/11, when you're importing something into the country that's labeled as bacteria, that was a big problem. And so we worked, you know, all of a sudden we developed a relationship with Homeland Security. And so that was another interesting process in working with those agencies there. With my work at UNR, we worked with USDA mainly, some with FDA, and that was really, my work at UNR is really where my work with community groups came in. Anytime that you're working with fresh fruits and vegetables, you're working in the produce industry, not only are you regulated federally by food safety, but a lot of people get very interested in working with you as far as local food movements and things like that. And so we worked with a lot of nonprofits, Food Bank, Catholic Charities of Northern Nevada was one of our biggest partners in working at the university, working with smaller groups, education groups, that kind of thing. We had a relationship with Renowned Health Systems. We provided fresh fruits and vegetables to the Renowned cafeteria for their cancer patients. And so that came with a set of regulations and authorities that we had to go through. So, and then of course here, working with USDA, FDA, EPA. I'm sure there's other ones I'm missing, but also partner state agencies and BLM, U.S. Forest Service, NDOW, Department of Wildlife. So we work with all of those. So I have experience with working with all of those, and part of being administrator for plant industry is really furthering the development of those relationships. And I know the folks that I work with really feel strongly about that as well. So yeah, we all have to live together. So
we're going to go ahead and end this section with me asking you a question. Do you have any questions for us?
This is the hardest one. Yes. I do. I'm interested to hear from the board members about, with the change in governor that has recently happened and a lot of changes in heads of state agencies and the issues with federal funding, not really being secure. I'd like to hear if the board feels that there's any change in direction or focus that the Department of Agriculture needs to take in this climate.
All right, I'll open it up to anyone that wants to answer that question. I think actually probably the best way is for us to, kind of voice our thoughts and
I'd love to hear
issues
them.
there. So I'll go ahead and start. I think that we, as a department, as a board, need to hold fast, no matter what the changes are on the politics of the nation or the state. our role and our responsibility is to protect agriculture in the state of Nevada. And likewise with that, all the other things that go along with that. But I really don't think that should be changing our direction as a board, as a department. Is it meaning that we're going to work with different individuals? Yes. I've been using the terminology of a dance, and that, you know, your partner may change, but you don't want to step on each other's toes. You want it to be as smooth as you can, but likewise you've got to make it work. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from. Anyone else care to chime in?
Woody Worthington for the record.
Mr. Worthington.
I like your analogy on the dance. Yes, it is. But the dance is still the same. Our values, what we stand for, what agriculture is all about. The team is wonderful. I mean, obviously for each department, it kind of runs itself, you know, and I think, you know, whoever's in charge or whatever, you know, entity's there is still going to run, you know, but our values are still there.
Dr. Spradley?
You know, I think my biggest concern about the focus of the future is the fact that we've been stuck in neutral for 6 months. You know, there were programs that were initiated, and everything's kind of been sitting on hold because of the departure of the previous director, of course, but because we had an election coming up, and then we had the legislature. I mean, all this is combined to actually set this department back, in my mind, to just status quo for 6 months. And I would feel that the future needs to be, the focus of the future needs to be on, okay, implementing, getting things jump-started again as to where we were. Those initiatives that are sitting out in the periphery that may not have been functioning yet, we need to have a hard look at those and see, okay, are we going to approach those differently? Are we going to try and institute what was already in motion? I see that as the future now, and it's because of the length of time we've been sitting here, and it's been so hard to get things done because of the election, the departure of Jim, and those things need to be corrected and get everything rolling again.
Any other questions or any other answers to the question?
Yes, I'd like.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Higby.
Marlon Higby for the record. There's been, in the last few years, there's been a movement to remove the natural resources from one area to another, our water mainly. And we need to understand, need to have an understanding that the natural resources, the ag industry in the state of Nevada is solely based on the natural resources that are available. And if we don't protect those natural resources that drives all our industry from row cropping to federal land grazing, if we don't protect the basis of those resources that hold those industries together, we're going to lose them. We've already lost in the state of Nevada in the last 30 years, 75% of the grazing. The numbers of the livestock are gone. And so you're working right now with 25% of what's left. And if we don't protect that, we're going to lose it all.
Anyone like to add anything to that? Outlying areas? Any thoughts? Mr. No.
The record. I completely agree with what everybody has been saying, and it just is, to me, with so many new members in the legislature, a lot of them from urban areas, we've got to really focus on education for not only the legislatures and the public, their constituents, but emphasize more the agriculture's role in our society and make them understand how important that is, along with those natural resources that keep us going.
Right.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Okay, go ahead. Fair enough. Fair enough. Follow-up question.
So speaking to what you said, Dr. Spratling, and so is the board or board members,
satisfied with the level of engagement of the board currently in the department?
Can I speak to that?
I know you have a strong opinion here, so go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Spratt.
this is the right field opinion on this. You know, statutorily, nothing has changed.
Sure.
You know, it's the responsibilities of this board. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I've noticed, you know, being on this board, the responsibility that has moved from the board in the regulatory field, you know, developing regulations, and it's gone solely to the discretion of the director.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the statute, you know, has not changed, but it has been looked at and said, okay, now this is a director's authority. We will, if you want to say something, fine, but you know, you don't even need to vote on this because it's at the director's discretion. And I've had a real discomfort with that. Obviously, you can't change the statute. But what would, you know, I guess maybe I could ask you back, what would be your approach to that situation?
Actually, we did not ask that question of our last.
Okay.
Disregard? Yeah, disregard. I hope that answered it, because I do think we've got to be careful on how far out we go with this.
Okay, that's my concern.
Okay.
And I guess kind of to follow up with that is that if you look at our past director versus the one that was previous to that, I believe you had one that pretty much brought everything to the board. I mean, it seemed like we were dealing with...
We even voted on the fee schedule for the laboratory, you know.
Versus our last director that really took it upon himself to do a lot of make the decisions that actually the director has the authority to take. And so as Dr. Spratling's alluding to, really what we're seeing is a board of kind of how it changed, the transition. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you want more of an interaction with the board.
I would say yes.
Okay. So does that answer your question?
It does.
All right, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and go into the next part of the questions, and I'm hoping that y'all remember what you asked. We're going to start with Paul No. Do you happen to remember how you asked your last question? If you want some assistance, we might be able to aid you.
Yes, I do, and that question is to Jennifer. Have you had much experience dealing with the legislature? And if not, how do you feel about that process of dealing directly with them?
And let me add this, actually, I had in there that you also were asking about the fiscal budgeting in regard to the legislature as well.
Yes, in regards to budgeting and actually anything else in the director's realm.
So my experience has occurred in the last 2 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, we had the opportunity to present our, Interim Director Conrad presented about our department, and we were there for questions, and I was able to present those. And then last week, I testified on our budget enhancements for plant industry to the legislature. But previously, I had not had experience testifying to the legislature other than on more community-centered projects that I was either subject matter expert or, you know, on behalf of, you know, an organization. So that's the experience I have as far as the legislature goes.
All right, thank you. We'll move to Dr. Spratling.
The responsibilities of this department are multi-pronged. And I think that one of the most important functions, you know, as far as the state is concerned, is the regulatory process, fair regulation and its implementation of the industries. That's for the public safety and public industry. But along with that, where you're going to the legislature and speaking and defending budgets and that sort of thing, a lot of interaction between you and the legislators will, you know, there'll be questions asked, and if you don't have enough agricultural background to understand those nuances of some of the questions that are being asked, how will you deal with that with those types of situations where those differences in wording can make a big difference in the outcomes for an industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that I do have the agricultural background. Last week when we testified for our budget in the legislature, I probably provided more information than I really wanted to know, to be honest with you. It's important to know your subject matter. It's important. You're representing an industry. You have to know what people are doing on the ground. You have to understand what your industry is all about. And
can I follow up, because I had one, I maybe didn't ask all the entire question that I asked last time.
Yeah, actually, that's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
Okay, would you feel uncomfortable feeling that you're in a role of advocacy for these multiple industries out here, as opposed to, in addition to supplying information, details, and those sorts of things?
All the different industries, I think, is actually what you...
All the industries, yeah, whether it be from petroleum to livestock to plant industry, EPA, or environmental concerns.
Right. So I just want to make sure I got the question right. So would I, as a director, feel important or feel comfortable to speak on behalf of the industry or as an advocate to the industries? Absolutely. Yeah, without hesitation.
Thank you.
The next one, I did a pretty good job of summarizing everyone's questions but my own. So, one of the things that we as a department and a board have been facing, one of the issues has been the Virginia Range feral stray horses. With that, and obviously you've worked in the department, you live here locally, so you're pretty familiar with that. What would you see as your approach or your ideas or some of your thoughts on dealing with that issue?
So, a couple of things. So, the approach, were I to become director, would be to meet with those that are dealing with the issue and have been for quite some time. Yes, I work with the department. I'm a member of the community, but I'm not privy to all of the discussions that have been happening on the Virginia Range horse issue. I understand probably a lot more than the average person, but I still don't have. So I would, meet with Jerry, meet with Doug, and Chris, and especially internally, to find out the history of what's been happening, what's been done, what have we tried, what are the conversations that we've had, what are the conversations we should have had. All of those, background pieces of information. I know one thing from sitting in board meetings when I'm doing my reports is that we have to find a solution to this. It's been going on for quite some time, and like I said, I don't know the history of the internal workings, but we do have to come to a solution. It seems to me that we definitely need to engage the governor's office more in a solution because it is so high profile, and have them become, request them, I guess I should say, to be more engaged, or at least to find out what their stance is so that we know how to move forward. Having conversation with each one of the board's members and finding out, a little bit more about the history and how the board wants to move forward. I think there is a solution. It might be one of those solutions where, nobody's happy, so you've hit the right happy medium, but we have to do something to wrap it up.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Paris, you had the final question for us?
Yes. Jennifer, sorry to get you involved in the second hot topic in the state, but as I represent the wool growers, two of our issues that I work on the most is animal health and predator control. Predator control is always a hot topic. I just want to understand how you feel about predator control and how you see yourself working with Wildlife Services, with Mr. Jensen, I think, is in the room with you there, and just in general how to protect all livestock. There's a lot of cattle people that use wildlife services also. It's not just the wool growers, but that is a concern of ours, is how predator control is handled. Thank you.
Can I ask, is this Park? This is Park, isn't it? Yeah? Okay, all right. So I apologize that I don't know more about Park and the Park program. I think that starting out, well, first I talked to Doug, find out what's been going on. But I think, well, I'm, always looking at what NRS and NAC say regarding to how to work with those agencies, having a meeting with Mr. Jensen and, finding out about those programs. I think that I'm not up to date with the concerns or maybe the issues that is facing you right now. I mean, the Wildlife Services is out there, right? I mean, they're out there doing their job. So I'm maybe I'm not up to date with that exact issue, but it would be, to get more up to date with that issue would be certainly speaking with you, as a member of the board and who knows most about the issue, and speaking to our, Doug, our animal industry administrator, to talk to him about what's going on as well. So I'm sorry I can't give you more detailed sort of policy answer to that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your position that you want to visit more with either myself or the people that are the professionals in the state. That would be a huge step forward. So thank you.
You probably want to go on, but this completes it. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and let you step down.
Okay.
And we're going to go ahead and move on to item 4C, which is an action item. Discussion, possible action regarding... Yes,
thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You can stay if you want.
I'm leaving or staying?
Whatever you want to do.
Public meeting.
Yes, public meeting, so you can stay.
Okay.
So item C, discussion, possible action regarding appointment from among the above two applicants of the Director of Nevada Department of Agriculture, subject to the Governor's approval pursuant to NRS 561.115. So this is an action item, and actually I'll open it up to public comment first. If anyone would like to make public comment before we get started here. All right, so with that being said, this is the opportunity for the board to deliberate, for us to talk about our two candidates. So here you go. This is your opportunity. Don't all speak up at once. Dr. Spratling.
I think we're faced here with a real dichotomy with our two candidates, two very qualified candidates. And one has an extreme experience and very qualified from the administrative level to dealing with division, the division within the department, with the personnel involved, trying to bring this and solutions together, as well exemplified in our first interview. Okay, the other side of that, but with basically no agricultural background over the years to temper the thoughts and opinions of that person as director. The other side, we have a person who has been at administrative level, maybe not quite to the extreme experience as the first. I think it's pretty easy to come to that conclusion. But who has some experience in with a background in agriculture and agricultural business and dealing with agricultural businesses. So I think it's going to come down to a decision, okay, which one is going to be best for a director to lead this department into the future? because this is something that it's clearly spelled out in statute, is hiring, interviewing, and selecting a director to be then sent on, that person's name sent on to the governor for approval. So we have a clear statutory obligation to deal with this, where there are a lot of other things that we're starting to have kind of a murky, authority over. This is one that is so important, and we have clear authority. So, saying that, I've maybe laid out the decision we have to make, but, and I would like to hear from the rest of the board.
So I'll add a little bit to that. Not to apply pressure to you guys, but in all honesty, the way I'm looking at this is probably the biggest decision that we as a board will be making in years to come. When we hired Director Barbie, we were very fortunate. We made the right decision. We did our due diligence as a board, and he did very well for the department and agriculture in general. With this, I just want to make sure that don't take this lightly, because this truly is a huge step in the direction of the department as a whole, and likewise all of our industries. So please, don't be bashful. If there's something you're concerned about, something you want to talk about, please, now's the time to bring it up, okay? Mr. Kuhn. Almost called you a doctor.
I appreciate what was said as far as experience in this particular area. And in my mind, I guess I look at also what was said as far as experience, contact, abilities that extend beyond agriculture. And something tells me that Ms. Gontine is a quick learner, as far as what she'd need to know. And what I said earlier, I meant sincerely. I haven't been on the board very long, but I have been very impressed, and I respect the knowledge and the expertise that the staff has. As I said in those meetings, I sit down in Las Vegas with Paul, and you don't hear from me too much, but I've learned a great deal in the last month from all of you, but I've learned a lot from the staff too. And with Ms. Contine's ability to work with people, and after all, she worked with, it was around 400 people we heard, and the budget that she was responsible for, that's a lot of responsibility. And in my mind, and I think she has a very strong personality in a most positive way, a good way. And I do believe that she probably has been involved directly with personnel issues, within the department that she's overseen. So, anyway, that's how I feel. And both two wonderful ladies that would do a good job, I'm sure, will do a great job. But I think that to go with someone that has that expertise and that ability to deal in a broader arena.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Mr. No, go ahead.
I have a question for Jerry. You have probably more experience dealing directly with Jennifer. What do you feel are her capabilities, you think, going forward if she were to be approved for director position?
And Paul, actually, I'm going to interrupt you, because I actually think that you have to remember that we're asking about an opinion of someone from staff, that she's hoping to be an assistant director in the future, and so potentially she could say something that would put her job in jeopardy.
All right, agreed. But I have to agree with Boyd, is that we're dealing with, it's too bad that we can't take the experiences of both of these applicants and put them together, because that would make a perfect candidate. Unfortunately, we can't. And I agree with Mr. Boyd Mr. Spratling as to their capabilities. I think that on the one hand, we do have a very, very capable, experienced employee that has dealt with a broader range of things within our government capabilities. But then one, on the other hand, that has more experience with this department in specifically dealing with this department, and has far better knowledge of the components of it. So I think it is a tough decision for us, but I think we all have to agree on what's more important.
All right, thank you, Paul. Actually, Jerry's going to make a comment.
Yeah, so all I wanted to say is I'm not comfortable commenting on a particular applicant.
Okay.
I think they're both, I mean, I reviewed their applications, and I think they're two very qualified candidates. So that's all.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snyder?
Yes, I think Dr. Spratling summed it up very well, and it boils down to agricultural knowledge and experience or not. And for me, that's critical that we have that agricultural background.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Mr.
I'd have to say pretty much the same thing. It's both of them could use one could use agriculture experience, one could use legislative experience, but to me, a strong advocate for the agriculture that has the knowledge of it, to me, is more important. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lackey?
Ms. Lackey, for the record, I think they both are very good candidates, honestly, and it is true, just what everyone's saying is that if the two of them together, we would have the perfect candidate. But knowing what I know about ag, I believe that it really is important to have the agricultural background, understanding all the little idiosyncrasies that happen in all the different industries, so that you can make really good decisions. I think that that's very important.
Any other? Go ahead.
I would just like, ideally, the individual to take this position would be somebody that was born and raised in the industry and out on the land, and had the college and the education and the degrees that these two individuals, these two candidates have, but we don't have that. And so I'm in agreement that the individual with the ag background is probably the way I'm going to go, because of the deeper understanding of the land and how it functions and the natural resources. And when they all come together, we end up with agriculture.
Okay. Pete, were you getting ready to speak?
Yes, I agree with just about everything everybody else has said, but I do feel stronger about having an agricultural background. We are the Department of Agriculture, and regardless of how much agriculture background both candidates have, I believe the one with the most agricultural background. We're not that big of an agency to, with that many employees that can't be overcome. So I am in favor of an agricultural background. Thank you.
Thank you. So actually, I'm going to throw a question out to you guys, because obviously, I mean, just like we've all seen, we have one with a lot of experience, director of a department, and working in that role. And yes, we've got someone with department experience. Both of them are going to go through a learning curve. The question is, which one will pick up more quickly? Is the one with the agriculture experience going to pick up the leadership, the management from department level quickly, or is the person that has that experience already on that side, that administrative experience, are they going to be able to pick up the agriculture side more quickly? And that's one thing that I would suggest that we kind of think through, that it's going to be a trade-off on one side or the other. One with the experience on one is also the weakness on the others. So I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about that as well. Mr. Worthington?
I totally, go with you. I mean, as far as that, agriculture versus experience and stuff like that. But as we, as we progress, and I mean, NDA just being on the board for a couple of years now, it's really gone in a great kind of movement type deal in a lot of ways. I would say, just my personal opinion, I think it's kind of a passion no matter what you do, whether it's a private industry or a state position or something like that. And I think that individual is imperative. I mean, obviously, it's a learning curve on both sides, as far as their leadership. But I think what's really important is, like you guys said, the agriculture, having just, been in the trenches and kind of understanding what's trending, the diversification of agriculture and stuff like that. So I would really look at that and make that your decision. Hopefully that makes sense.
Dr. Shretley?
I would, just to be clear, I think it's important, we've all talked about, a lack of administrative experience from this audit. I think that's unfair. It's a level. We have cabinet level experience, administrative experience, as opposed to a division level. And so it's not without experience in an agriculture, in the plant industry division. So, it's not like there's no experience there developing budgets and all the things that we have to worry about administratively. But I want to go back just a little bit to talk about the other prong, is that we have to, because, anyway, it's been said already that the legislature is becoming more and more urban, and the legislature basically holds our future in our hands. And advocacy is one word to use. Another is just straight education. Without that, that foresight of our director sitting in front of testifying before a committee and saying, okay, these are the things that are important, and that would do this to an industry, or that would do that. We want to have fair regulation. No one is talking about, diminishing regulation just because you have an agricultural background. That's not true. We want good and fair policies for the public. We want food safety. We want all those things. And we want to have proper weights, and measures. That part of it. You have to know that when you're buying a gallon of gas, you're getting a gallon of gas. All those things are extremely important administratively. But still, as we go to talk to people that have some bearing on our future and making policy and law for our future, I think it's so important to have, kind of a baseline agricultural understanding of that in order to come up with a snap answer for a legislator. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Frey?
Well, I think we had very, very good applicants, both sides. And I would agree with Dr. Funk. We probably should really emphasize how important agriculture is, but it takes a long, long time to understand how agriculture works in the entire state and how important that is to our nation and the state of Nevada. And I am really reluctant about seeing somebody going up to the state legislature without that real strong agriculture knowledge. And we have two applicants, again, very good. One is, I think, going to slide in a lot easier than the other applicant in the way of controlling the staff and maintaining the budgets and everything, because she has the experience. And so I'm all on the side of agriculture.
Anyone else?
Paul Rowe again. I agree with everything that everybody's been saying, and it is a very delicate balance. But you have to understand too that the director is going to be relying on all of the department heads in the agency to give them the information that they need to carry forward. And it really is important that we have somebody who does deal with the legislature, has the experience and knows how to present things to them, is to me just as important. And it seems to me like it may be a little harder for somebody to learn that side of it than it would be to rely on their department heads for the information that they need to take to the legislature.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Any other thoughts? All right, so at this point, like I said, this is an action item. This is where we make a decision.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Spratling.
I would move that the board consider and vote to approve Jennifer Ott to be sent to the governor's office for approval.
I second.
Okay, the motion was made by Dr. Spratling. The second was made by Charlie Frey. What we're going to do on this one is I want to actually go with a roll call vote on this. So before we go to that, I just want to open it up one more time to questions before we go to vote. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Lackey.
Oh, I have a question real quick. I'm probably way cart before the horse, but so this position is at what salary? I know that's public knowledge. How much does it start at?
$124,000 and change, so to speak. It's a unclassified position that is, and the salary is determined by the legislature. Then it's paid bill.
Were you thinking of applying?
No.
Okay, so.
Sorry, excuse me, because there has been the most recent pay bill that was an increase, so it's 127.
So, or state-wise, you have to start at that level. You can't just, you know what I'm saying? Is that, so how does?
Yeah, that's a good question. Jenny might be able to answer that for us.
Would you please, and if you would be
From
so
a director
kind,
level,
state your name for the record.
I haven't been involved in the director pay before, so.
Thank you. I'm Jenny Hudson, Personnel Officer for the department. So the actual approximate salary annually is $127,906 plus benefits. That is on the employee-employer compensation plan. There is also an employer compensation plan, which is slightly less, but we'll just stick with the employee-employer plan. That salary is the maximum allowable payable salary to this position in the unclassified pay bill. That does not mean that they have to be paid at the max. However, they wouldn't be paid anything lower than anybody else within the agency because they are the director. And so I have seen where unclassified positions do not come in being paid at the maximum allowable salary. That, I will say, though, is not defined within the regulations as to who determines that salary. So that would probably need to be a discussion with the governor's office, I would assume.
Okay.
But in our budget, that is what we have planned for. Yeah,
The maximum.
Yes, the maximum.
Okay, thank you. It's actually a good question.
Right, exactly, you know, like this, that level.
Okay, so we have the motion and a second. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, do a roll call vote. And I'll go ahead and start with Dr. Spratling. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. All those opposed will say nay. Dr. Spratling.
Aye.
Ms. Lackey.
Aye.
Mr. Frey.
Aye.
Mr. No.
Aye.
Mr. Worthington.
Aye.
Mr. Kuhn.
Nay.
Mr. Higbee.
Aye.
Mr. Paris.
Aye.
Mr. Dufresne.
Aye.
Mr. Snyder.
Aye.
All right. It looks like Jennifer Ott has been voted in as our name that we're going to bring towards the...
I'm sorry, Jenny Hudson for the record. Would you please vote, Chair?
I actually am going to vote nay. Okay. With that being said, that is it. Our Jennifer Ott will be our director, the director's name that we're moving on to the governor's office. So thank everyone for helping us there. So it did pass, not unanimously, but there were 2 nays. 7-2. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for helping me with my math.
Anything.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and go on to item 5, board presentations. Right. Okay. So on this one, what I'm looking for is for us to be able to move this item in a letter format towards the Assembly Committee. So let me read it off. Nevada Board of Agriculture directs the Nevada Department of Agriculture pursuant to NRS 561.105, the draft letter on behalf of the Board to the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, the Senate Committee on Finance, the Governor Steve Sisolak requesting consideration that all Nevada post-certified sworn peace officer positions with the NDA's Livestock Enforcement Program and all associated position equipment be funded by the State General Fund. This is an action item, and pretty much on this one, I mean, all of us that have been on the board for a while have understood the issues with financing under this section specifically. And I mean, in my opinion, one of the things that we really need to make the point known is that a lot of this time can be spent on public safety, and it's not necessarily something that is just out checking someone's cattle. So that's actually why I wanted to move forward with this letter. So anyone have any questions or concerns about that?
No, I make the motion to pass, to draft a letter on behalf of the board, Assembly Committee and the Ways and Means.
So Mr. Worthington has made a motion.
Second.
Oh, actually, Lackey, I hit. The second was made. Ms. Lackey. So what we're going to do is go ahead and vote on this one. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So what we'll do is just put that back in your hands to handle. Okay. All right, so we have one more section of public...
I got a question. I haven't been here, Rex. That's only my second meeting. I got a question on that. Now, is that going to pertain to all brand inspectors or just law enforcement?
Just the law enforcement. Those that have actually gone through post.
Okay, I read that. They've gone through post. I wasn't sure what kind of arrangement they had with regular brand inspectors. If they wanted to go to post, could they be sent to post? If they didn't want to go, I don't know.
Mr. Ferris, would you mind talking to us?
Enlighten me. Instruct me here.
Okay, for the record, Doug Ferris. What we have currently, there are 5 positions where they're post-certified peace officers.
Okay.
Right, so they're agricultural enforcement officers. Brand inspectors are actually part-time positions, which are currently manpower positions. They're have no law enforcement powers or anything like that, and it's not required to have any law enforcement experience to be a brand inspector. That answer.
Is that could a brand inspector have the availability to go to post if they so chose?
If we have an open position for...
So there is set positions.
They would have to apply for it.
the different districts across the state then?
Pardon me?
So there is set positions for the districts across the state, the brand districts, right?
Right, there's 4 districts across the state, and then we have enforcement officers in each of those 4. But if a brand inspector wanted to become an enforcement officer, they would have to apply for a position, just like any civilian.
Take one of those open spots.
And, right, and post, yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doug. Okay, so we'll open this up to public comment. Anyone in Elko?
Did we have public comment on that last motion?
Actually,
I don't see any public comment in Elko.
yeah, didn't I open that to public comment?
You did, but you don't.
Oh, okay.
So that's your discretion.
Okay, all right, thank you. Should have kicked me. She's supposed to kick me. Okay. Paul, is anyone there, public comment with you in Las Vegas?
No, no one.
Okay, and anyone care to speak here in Sparks? Okay, then we're on to item number 7, and I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. I appreciate all you being a part of the process here.
Mr. Chairman, one question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.